My 3 children had me committed by force, saying, "You're a burden, mother." They took my documents and disappeared for 6 months. On my 75th birthday, a lawyer appeared. "Ma'am, you've inherited 30 million. My children found out through the newspapers. Listen to my story until the end, and comment which city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached. My name is Margaret Elizabeth Thompson, and I am 75 years old today. Everything started when my 3 children decided I was nothing more than a burden to them. I had raised Robert, Susan, and Michael with every ounce of love I could muster after their father died when they were still young. I worked 2 jobs to put them through school, sacrificed my own dreams so they could pursue theirs, and never once complained when they moved far away and only called on holidays. But apparently, none of that mattered when they gathered in my living room that cold Tuesday morning 6 months ago. "You're becoming a liability, mother," Robert said, adjusting his expensive tie as he avoided my eyes. He was my eldest, 48 years old, and had inherited his father's cold business demeanor, but none of his warmth. "You forgot to turn off the stove again last week, and Mrs. Henderson from next door said she saw you wandering around the yard in your nightgown." "I was just checking on my roses," I protested, but Susan cut me off with that dismissive wave she'd perfected as a teenager. "Mom, we've made a decision," she announced, her voice carrying the authority she used in her law firm. At 45, she had become everything I once admired: successful, independent, fierce, but somewhere along the way, she'd lost her compassion. "We've found a place for you. A nice facility where you'll have people your own age to talk to." Michael, my baby at 42, at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. He shifted in his chair, running his hands through his thinning hair. "It's for the best, Ma. You'll see. You'll be happier there." The nice facility turned out to be Sunset Manor, a state-run nursing home that smelled of disinfectant and despair. The paint was peeling off the walls, the floors were stained with decades of neglect, and the staff looked as worn down as the building itself. This was where my children brought me, against my will, with nothing but a single suitcase of clothes. "You are a burden, mother," Robert repeated as they prepared to leave me there. "Here you'll have company your own age. Maybe you'll finally stop bothering us with your constant needs." Before I could even process what was happening, they had taken everything. My purse, my identification, my credit cards, my checkbook. Susan, with her legal expertise, had somehow managed to get temporary guardianship papers signed, claiming I was mentally incompetent. The speed with which they'd orchestrated this betrayal left me reeling. "The staff will take good care of you," Michael mumbled, still unable to look me in the eye. "We'll visit soon." But they didn't visit. Not soon, not ever. My roommate was a woman named Dorothy Castellanos, an 82-year-old former teacher who had been abandoned by her family 3 years earlier. She had kind eyes behind thick glasses and a gentle smile that never quite masked her deep sadness. "They all say they'll visit," she told me on my first night, as I sobbed into my pillow. "Mine said the same thing. My daughter lives 20 minutes away, but I haven't seen her since the day she dropped me off. At least you're not alone in this, dear." The daily routine at Sunset Manor was soul-crushing. Wake up at 6, breakfast at 7, usually cold eggs and burnt toast. Then we'd shuffle to the common room where a television blared, talk shows no one watched. Lunch was at noon, dinner at 5, and lights out at 9. The staff, led by a bitter head nurse named Gladys Morrison, treated us more like inventory than human beings. "Move along, Thompson," Nurse Morrison would bark whenever she saw me lingering anywhere. "You're not paying for a vacation." She was a large woman, with greying hair pulled back so tightly it seemed to stretch her features into a permanent scowl. Her assistant, a young man named Kevin Phillips, was kinder, but clearly intimidated by his supervisor. The doctor, Dr. Harold Brennan, visited once a week and spent about 30 seconds with each patient. He was in his 60s, with tired eyes and an air of resignation that suggested he'd given up caring about his patients long ago. Most of us were over-medicated to keep us docile and manageable. 3 months into my stay, I met Father Jonathan Martinez, the volunteer chaplain who came twice a week. He was a kind man in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and genuine compassion in his eyes. Unlike the staff, he actually listened when we spoke. "I had a good life once," I told him during one of our conversations. "I was a librarian for 30 years, raised 3 children, volunteered at the community center. Now they treat me like I'm already dead." "You're still very much alive, Margaret," he assured me, "and your worth isn't determined by how others treat you." There was also Eleanor Walsh, a spirited 78-year-old who refused to let the place break her spirit. She had been a Broadway dancer in her youth and still carried herself with grace, despite her walker. She became my closest friend and ally in that terrible place. "The trick is not to let them win," she whispered to me during one of our walks in the small, neglected garden behind the building. "I've been here 4 years, and I've seen too many good people just give up and fade away. Don't let that happen to you." But it was hard not to fade away. The isolation was crushing. Every day I watched the small parking lot, hoping to see Robert's black sedan, or Susan's white SUV, or Michael's red truck, but they never came. Not for Thanksgiving, not for Christmas, not even when I caught pneumonia in January and nearly died. During my illness, I was cared for by a night nurse named Patricia Gonzalez, a woman in her 30s who showed me the first real kindness I'd experienced since arriving at Sunset Manor. She would sit with me during her breaks, bringing me extra blankets and making sure I took my medication properly. "My own grandmother is in a place like this," she confided one evening. "I try to visit her as often as I can. I don't understand how families can just abandon their loved ones." "Perhaps they have their reasons," I said, though I was beginning to doubt that myself. As the months crawled by, I began to lose hope. My children had effectively erased me from their lives. The woman who had given birth to them, raised them, loved them unconditionally, had simply ceased to exist in their world. I started to believe maybe they were right. Maybe I was just a burden, a relic from their past that they were better off without. Dorothy tried to keep my spirits up, sharing stories from her teaching days and showing me photos of former students who still sent her letters. Eleanor would regale us with tales from her dancing career, complete with dramatically recreated scenes that made us laugh despite our circumstances. Father Martinez continued his visits, offering comfort and reminding us that we still had value, but the crushing reality of abandonment weighed heavily on all of us. I watched fellow residents like Harold Kim, a retired engineer, slowly deteriorate from the isolation. He would sit by the window for hours, waiting for visitors who never came. Mary O'Brien, a former nurse who had dedicated her life to caring for others, barely spoke anymore after her sons stopped calling entirely. The staff continued their routine neglect and occasional cruelty. Nurse Morrison seemed to take particular pleasure in reminding us how unwanted we were. "Your families pay the state minimum to keep you here," she would say. "Don't expect any special treatment." Dr. Brennan increased my medications, claiming I was showing signs of depression and anxiety. The pills made me groggy and confused, which only served to reinforce their narrative that I was incompetent. I began to wonder if I really was losing my mind. It was Kevin Phillips, the young nursing assistant, who sometimes showed glimpses of humanity. He would help me with my correspondence when I tried to write letters to my children, letters that were never answered. He seemed troubled by the treatment we received, but was too afraid of losing his job to speak up. "I'm sorry about your family," he said to me one day, while helping me to the common room. "My grandmother always said that family is supposed to stick together no matter what." "I thought so too," I replied, feeling the weight of my disappointment. The activities coordinator, Lisa Chang, was a young woman fresh out of college who tried her best to bring some joy to our days. She organized simple crafts and games, but her enthusiasm was constantly undermined by the facility's limitations and the staff's indifference. She would arrive with supplies for art projects only to find them mysteriously missing or broken. "I wish I could do more for you all," she would say apologetically. "You deserve so much better than this." As winter turned to spring, I began to accept that this was my fate, to live out my remaining years in this place, forgotten by the people I loved most. I stopped watching the parking lot for familiar cars. I stopped asking Kevin to help me write letters. I stopped hoping. Then, on a warm day in early summer, the day I turned 75, everything changed. I was sitting in the garden with Eleanor and Dorothy, picking at the small cake Lisa had managed to procure for my birthday celebration, when Kevin appeared at my side, looking flustered. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, slightly out of breath, "there's a man here to see you, a lawyer." My heart jumped. Perhaps one of my children had finally come to their senses. Perhaps they had sent their attorney to arrange for my release from this place. The man waiting in the visitor's room was not what I expected. James Wellington was tall and distinguished, probably in his early 60s, with silver hair and an expensive suit. He carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to important matters, and his briefcase looked like it cost more than most of the residents' monthly stipend. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, rising and extending his hand. "I'm James Wellington from Wellington, Hartley and Associates. I apologize for arriving unannounced, but I have some rather extraordinary news to share with you." I shook his hand tentatively, still hopeful that this had something to do with my children. "Are you representing Robert or Susan? She's a lawyer, you know." "No, ma'am. I'm here about your cousin, Preston Thompson." Preston Thompson. I hadn't heard that name in decades. He was my father's nephew, maybe 15 years older than me, who had moved away when I was just a child. I vaguely remembered him as a quiet, intelligent boy who was always reading and seemed destined for bigger things than our small town could offer. "Preston?" I said, searching my memory. "I haven't seen him since I was a little girl. He went away to university and never came back." "Yes, that's correct, Mr. Wellington said, opening his briefcase and removing several official-looking documents. "Preston Thompson built quite a successful life for himself. He became a petroleum engineer, invested wisely, and accumulated considerable wealth over the decades. He never married, had no children, and his parents, your father's brother and his wife, passed away many years ago." I nodded, still not understanding why this mattered to me now. "Mrs. Thompson," he continued, his voice taking on a more formal tone, "Preston Thompson died 3 months ago. He left very specific instructions regarding his estate, and I'm here to inform you that you are his sole beneficiary." The words didn't register at first. I stared at him blankly, waiting for the rest of the explanation. "I'm sorry," I said finally. "I don't understand." "His sole beneficiary?" "Yes, ma'am. Preston Thompson left his entire estate to you. The total value is approximately $30 million. The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the arms of my chair, certain I had misheard him. $30 million? Yes. Real estate holdings, investment portfolios, business interests, and liquid assets totaling just over $30 million. He slid a document across the small table between us. "This is a copy of his will." As you can see, he was quite specific about his wishes. With shaking hands, I picked up the document and tried to focus on the words. The legal language was dense and confusing, but there it was, in black and white. "I hereby bequeath my entire estate to my cousin, Margaret Elizabeth Thompson." "But why?" I whispered. "I haven't seen him in 60 years. I wouldn't have even recognized him on the street." Mr. Wellington's expression softened slightly. "According to the personal letter he left with his will, he remembered you fondly from childhood. He said you were the only family member who ever showed him kindness when he was young. Apparently, you shared your lunch with him once when he had forgotten his, and you defended him from some bullies who were teasing him about his clothes." I did remember that vaguely, a skinny boy with patched clothes and an old lunch pail that was often empty. I had been maybe 8 years old, and my mother had packed me an extra sandwich that day. "He never forgot that kindness," Mr. Wellington continued. "He hired private investigators to keep track of you over the years. He knew about your husband's death, your children, your work at the library. He also knew about your current situation. He knew I was here? Yes, in fact, that influenced his final decision. He was quite disturbed to learn that your children had placed you here against your will and then abandoned you. His letter specifically mentions that he wanted to ensure you could live out your remaining years with dignity and comfort. I couldn't speak. The magnitude of what he was telling me was overwhelming. $30 million. More money than I could even comprehend. Enough to change everything. There are some legal processes we'll need to complete, Mr. Wellington explained, but I can have you out of this facility within the week. In the meantime, I'll be arranging for improved care and accommodations for you here. That's when the reality of my situation truly hit me. I wasn't trapped anymore. I wasn't dependent on my children's reluctant charity or the state's minimal care. I was free. More than free. I was wealthy beyond my wildest dreams. But more than the money, I was validated. Someone had remembered me with kindness. Someone had thought I deserved better than this place. Mr. Wellington, I said, tears streaming down my face. How did Preston die? Peacefully, in his sleep. He was 87. He had been in declining health for several months, which is when he made his final arrangements. He paused, studying my face. Mrs. Thompson, are you all right? This is a lot to process. I'm fine, I said, though I was anything but fine. I was overwhelmed, grateful, angry, sad, and hopeful all at once. When will this become public knowledge? The probate process typically involves some public filing, and an estate of this size often attracts media attention. I would estimate that news of your inheritance will become public within the next few days. As if on cue, Kevin appeared in the doorway. Mrs. Thompson, there are some reporters outside asking questions about you, and, he hesitated, your son Robert is here. My first instinct was joy. My son had finally come to visit me. But then reality set in. Robert was here because of the money. Somehow, word had already leaked about the inheritance. Show Mr. Robert to the family conference room, I told Kevin. Then, turning to Mr. Wellington, I said, I think I'd like you to be present for this conversation. We found Robert pacing in the small conference room, his face flushed and his expensive suit wrinkled, as if he'd rushed here straight from his office. When he saw me enter with Mr. Wellington, his expression shifted from impatience to forced concern. Mother, he exclaimed, suddenly playing the part of the devoted son, I came as soon as I heard. Are you all right? Has anyone been taking advantage of you? The audacity of his performance was breathtaking. 6 months of abandonment, and now he was concerned about people taking advantage of me. I'm fine, Robert, I said calmly, taking a seat across from him. Though I'm surprised to see you. It's been quite a while. He had the grace to look momentarily embarrassed. Yes, well, I've been incredibly busy with work. You know how it is. But when I saw the news reports about this inheritance situation, I dropped everything to make sure you were protected. News reports. I looked at Mr. Wellington, who cleared his throat. I'm afraid news of large inheritances tends to spread quickly, the lawyer explained. There may have been some unofficial leaks from the probate court. Mother, Robert continued, leaning forward, with what I assumed was meant to be a sincere expression. We need to talk about this inheritance. $30 million is a tremendous responsibility. You'll need help managing it, making sure no one takes advantage of you. I see. And who do you suggest should help me with this tremendous responsibility? Well, naturally, your family should be involved. Susan and Michael are on their way here as well. We can set up a trust fund, make sure the money is properly invested and managed. You won't have to worry about any of the complicated financial decisions. There it was. They had abandoned me when they thought I was worthless. But now, they wanted to control me and my money. The transparent greed was almost insulting. That's very thoughtful of you, Robert, I said, my voice steady despite the anger building inside me. Tell me, how did you find out about the inheritance? He looked uncomfortable. It was in the newspaper. The financial section ran a story about Preston Thompson's estate. And that's the first time you'd heard of Preston Thompson? Well, yes. I mean, you might have mentioned him years ago, but I don't really remember any cousins from your side of the family. But you recognize the name enough to know he was related to me. Robert's face reddened. The article mentioned that the beneficiary was Margaret Elizabeth Thompson, currently residing at Sunset Manor. It wasn't hard to connect the dots. Mr. Wellington had been watching this exchange with interest. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, "perhaps I should explain that your cousin left very specific instructions about the management of his estate." "What kind of instructions?" Robert asked quickly. "The will stipulates that Mrs. Thompson has complete and sole control of all assets. No trusts, no guardianships, no management companies unless she specifically requests them. Preston Thompson was quite clear that the money was to give her absolute freedom and independence." I could see Robert's jaw clench. This wasn't going the way he'd planned. At that moment, Susan and Michael arrived, both looking as frazzled as Robert had. Susan's usually perfect hair was disheveled, and Michael's shirt was untucked. They had clearly rushed here in a panic. "Mom!" Susan exclaimed, embracing me with sudden affection. "We were so worried when we heard the news. Are you okay? Has anyone been pressuring you about this money?" The hypocrisy was stunning. These were the same children who had told me I was a burden, who had taken my documents and abandoned me in this place. Now they were worried about people pressuring me? "I'm fine, Susan," I said, gently extricating myself from her embrace. "Though I'm surprised to see you all here. It's been 6 months since any of you visited." Michael at least had the decency to look ashamed. "Mum, I'm sorry about that. Things have been really hectic, and we thought you were settling in well here." "Did you think that? Or did you just hope I would settle in and stop being your problem?" The room fell silent. My children exchanged glances, clearly unprepared for me to confront them so directly. Susan recovered first, slipping back into her lawyer mode. "Mum, we need to discuss the practical aspects of this situation. $30 million requires careful planning and management. There are tax implications, investment strategies, legal protections to consider." "She's right," Robert added. "This kind of wealth can attract all sorts of unsavory characters. You need family around you that you can trust." "Trust," I repeated slowly. "That's an interesting word coming from you, Robert." "What do you mean?" "I mean that 6 months ago you told me I was a burden. You had me declared mentally incompetent, took all my documents and credit cards, and dumped me in this state facility. You haven't visited once, haven't called, haven't even sent a birthday card. But now that I've inherited money, suddenly you're concerned about my welfare?" The three of them looked at each other uncomfortably. Susan spoke first, her voice taking on the tone she used when she was about to manipulate a jury. "Mum, I think you're misremembering how things happened. We were genuinely worried about your safety. You were having memory issues, leaving the stove on, wandering around confused. We found you the best care we could afford. The best care you could afford was a state facility where the paint is peeling and the staff treats us like cattle." "We looked at several places," Michael said defensively. "This one had the best reviews in our price range." "Your price range," I repeated. "How much do you pay for my care here, Michael?" He looked uncomfortable. The state covers most of it. We contribute what we can, which is about $200 a month, split between the three of us." $200 a month. Less than they probably spent on a single dinner out, and they had convinced themselves they were being generous. Mr. Wellington had been taking notes throughout this exchange. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, "would you like me to explain the next steps in the probate process?" "Yes, please. Within the week, you'll have access to immediate funds for your living expenses and care. The full estate will be transferred to you within 30 days, assuming no legal challenges to the will." "Legal challenges?" Susan's ears perked up. "What kind of legal challenges?" "Well, any family member could contest the will if they believed they had a valid claim to the estate, or if they questioned the testator's mental capacity at the time the will was written. However, Preston Thompson was quite thorough in his preparations. He had multiple psychiatric evaluations, confirming his mental competence, and the will was witnessed by several independent parties. I could practically see the wheels turning in Susan's head. She was calculating whether a legal challenge would be worth the time and expense. Of course, We would never challenge Uncle Preston's will, Robert said quickly. We're just concerned about Mom's ability to handle such a large inheritance responsibly. Preston wasn't your uncle, I corrected. He was my cousin. You've never met him, never even heard of him until today. Family is family, Susan said dismissively, and family looks out for each other. Where was this family loyalty for the past 6 months? The question hung in the air. None of my children had a good answer because there wasn't one. They had abandoned me when I was inconvenient and expensive, and now they were back because I was valuable. Eleanor Walsh appeared in the doorway, her walker clicking against the floor. "Margaret, dear, are you all right? Kevin said there were reporters outside asking questions about you." "I'm fine, Eleanor. These are my children, Robert, Susan, and Michael." Eleanor looked them up and down with the sharp eye of someone who had lived long enough to recognize opportunists. "Your children," she said coolly. "How nice that they finally came to visit." The barb hit its mark. Robert's face flushed, and Susan stiffened. "We've been very busy," Susan said defensively. "I'm sure," Eleanor replied dryly. 6 months is quite a busy stretch. Dorothy appeared behind Eleanor, her gentle face creased with concern. "Margaret, is everything all right? The staff is all buzzing about reporters and lawyers." "Everything's fine, Dorothy. I've just learned that I've inherited some money from a cousin." "How wonderful!" Dorothy's face lit up. "Maybe now you can get out of this terrible place." "That's exactly what I'm thinking," I said, looking directly at my children. "Mom," Michael said quickly, "you don't want to make any hasty decisions. This place has grown on you, hasn't it? You have friends here, a routine. Moving somewhere else might be disruptive." "Disruptive," I repeated. "You think leaving this place would be disruptive for me?" "Well, yes. Change can be hard at your age, at my age, as if 75 meant I was incapable of making decisions about my own life." "Mr. Wellington," I said, "what are my options for immediate housing?" "Whatever you'd like, Mrs. Thompson. I can arrange for a hotel suite tonight if you prefer, or help you find an apartment or house. With your new financial situation, your options are virtually limitless." "Mom, wait," Robert said, panic creeping into his voice. "You can't just rush into anything. You need time to think this through." "I've had 6 months to think," I replied. 6 months of being treated like I'm already dead, of being told I'm a burden, of being abandoned by the people I love most in the world. "I think I've done enough thinking." Susan tried a different approach. "Mom, we know we made some mistakes. We should have visited more often, kept in better touch. But we can fix that now. We can move you to a much nicer facility, somewhere with private rooms and better care. A facility that you choose, that you control, where you can visit me when it's convenient for you. We want what's best for you. What's best for me, or what's best for your access to my money." The accusation finally broke through their pretenses. Robert's face darkened with anger. "That's not fair, Mother. We're your children. We love you." "You love me?" I stood up, feeling stronger than I had in months. "You love me so much that you convinced a judge I was mentally incompetent so you could force me into this place against my will. You loved me so much that you took all my identification and credit cards so I couldn't leave. You loved me so much that you never visited, never called, never even sent a birthday card on my 75th birthday." "We were busy," Susan started. "Too busy for a 5-minute phone call? Too busy for a birthday card? Too busy to visit your mother for 6 months?" My voice was rising, and I didn't care who heard me. "But today, the day you read about my inheritance in the newspaper, suddenly you have time. Suddenly you love me again. Suddenly you're concerned about my welfare." The three of them stood there, unable to deny the truth of what I was saying. "Mr. Wellington," I said, turning to the lawyer, "I'd like you to arrange for my immediate departure from this facility. Tonight, if possible." "Of course, Mrs. Thompson. I'll have a car here within the hour." "Mom, please," Michael said, and for the first time he sounded genuinely desperate rather than calculating. "Don't do this. We're family. We made mistakes, but we can work this out." "You're right, Michael. We are family. And family is supposed to stick together, support each other, love each other unconditionally. But that's not what you did. You discarded me when I became inconvenient, and now you want me back because I have something you want. Ooh, we want our mother back, Susan said, tears in her eyes that looked surprisingly genuine. Your mother has been sitting in this terrible place for 6 months, waiting for you to remember that she exists. Now she's going to leave and live the life she chooses with people who actually care about her. Dorothy and Eleanor were watching this confrontation with obvious satisfaction. They had seen too many residents abandoned by their families to have any sympathy for my children's sudden change of heart. Where will you go? Robert asked. You don't know anyone. You don't have any friends outside of this place. I have friends right here who have shown me more kindness in 6 months than you have in the past several years. Maybe I'll help them get out of this place too. The suggestion that I might share my newfound wealth with my fellow residents rather than my children clearly horrified them. Susan's lawyer instincts kicked in. Mum, you need to be careful about people trying to take advantage of your generosity. These people barely know you. They might just be pretending to be your friends because they want your money. Like you are? The comparison hit home. Susan's face went white. That's different. We're your family. Family who abandoned me. Dorothy and Eleanor have been more family to me than you have. Dorothy smiled softly and squeezed my hand. You don't owe us anything, dear. We're just happy that you're getting a chance for a better life. Her selfless response only highlighted the contrast with my children's obvious greed. Kevin appeared in the doorway again. Mrs. Thompson, there's a car outside for you, and the reporters are asking if you'll make a statement. I'll make a statement, I said, surprising everyone, including myself. We all walked outside together, my children trailing behind, Dorothy and Eleanor flanking me, Mr. Wellington carrying his briefcase, and Kevin clearing a path through the small crowd of reporters that had gathered. The late afternoon sun felt warm on my face as I stepped out of Sunset Manor for what I hoped would be the last time. Several reporters thrust microphones toward me, all talking at once. Mrs. Thompson, how does it feel to inherit $30 million? Did you know your cousin was wealthy? What are your plans for the money? I raised my hand for quiet, and surprisingly, they actually listened. My name is Margaret Thompson, and 6 months ago, my 3 children had me declared mentally incompetent and forced me into this facility against my will. I gestured toward the building behind me. They took my identification, my credit cards, and my independence. They told me I was a burden and that I would be happier here with people my own age. The reporters were scribbling furiously. I could see Robert, Susan, and Michael standing behind me, their faces frozen with horror at what I was saying. For 6 months, not one of them visited me. Not for Thanksgiving, not for Christmas, not even for my 75th birthday, which was today. But when they read in the newspaper that I had inherited money, suddenly they found time to rush here and express their concern for my welfare. Are you saying your children abandoned you for financial reasons? One reporter asked. I'm saying that my children considered me worthless when I had nothing, and now they want to control me because I have something. But I'm 75 years old, not dead, and I'm perfectly capable of making my own decisions about my life and my money. What will you do with the inheritance? First, I'm going to live comfortably and independently, the way my cousin Preston wanted me to. Second, I'm going to make sure that the friends I've made here, who have shown me genuine kindness and loyalty, are properly taken care of. I turned to look at Dorothy and Eleanor, both of whom were crying. And third, I continued, turning back to the reporters, I'm going to make sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to other elderly people who can't fight back. There are too many families who warehouse their inconvenient relatives in places like this and then forget about them. Mrs. Thompson, another reporter called out, do you have anything to say to your children? I looked at Robert, Susan, and Michael, who were standing there looking devastated. Part of me felt sorry for them. They were about to be publicly humiliated, their reputations potentially destroyed. But a larger part of me felt that this was exactly what they deserved. I have something to say to all children who are thinking about abandoning their elderly parents, I said, still looking at them. Remember that you're not just taking away their independence and dignity. You're teaching your own children how to treat you when you're old and inconvenient. Think very carefully about the example you're setting. The reporters continued shouting questions as Mr. Wellington ushered me toward a Blacktown car. Dorothy and Eleanor embraced me tearfully. "Promise you'll keep in touch," Dorothy said. "Promise you won't forget about us." "I could never forget about you," I assured her. "You two are the closest thing to family I have." As we drove away from Sunset Manor, I looked back to see my children still standing in the parking lot, surrounded by reporters. They looked lost and confused, as if they couldn't understand how their sure thing had slipped away from them so quickly. Mr. Wellington had arranged for a suite at the city's most expensive hotel. As we rode the elevator to the 20th floor, I caught a glimpse of myself in the mirrored walls. I looked different somehow, stronger, more confident. The defeated, abandoned woman who had entered Sunset Manor 6 months ago was gone. The suite was larger than my old house, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. There was a sitting room, a bedroom, a full kitchen, and a dining room. Fresh flowers adorned every table, and a fruit basket sat on the counter with a welcome note from the hotel manager. "This is temporary, of course," Mr. Wellington explained, "until you decide what kind of permanent living situation you prefer." "How temporary?" I asked, settling into a plush armchair that was more comfortable than anything I'd sat in for months. "As long as you like. With your resources, you could live here permanently if you chose to." I laughed, still not quite believing my situation. Yesterday I was eating institutional food off plastic trays, and tonight I can order room service from a 5-star hotel. Yesterday you were also at the mercy of people who didn't have your best interests at heart, Mr. Wellington observed. Tonight you're in complete control of your own life. That evening I ordered room service, a real steak dinner with wine, and sat by the window watching the city lights. My phone, which Mr. Wellington had replaced since my children had taken my old one, rang constantly. Robert, Susan, and Michael all called multiple times, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails. "Mom, please call me back. We need to talk about this rationally. Mother, the reporters are calling us. This is getting out of hand. We need to present a united front. Ma, I'm sorry. I know we messed up. Please give us a chance to make it right." I deleted the messages without listening to all of them. The next morning, I woke up in a real bed with high-quality linens and sunlight streaming through clean windows. For the first time in 6 months, I had slept peacefully through the night without being awakened for medication checks or room inspections. Room service brought me breakfast on real china plates with silver utensils. As I ate, I watched the morning news and wasn't entirely surprised to see my story featured prominently. "Elderly woman inherits fortune after being abandoned by children," read the headline as they showed footage from yesterday's impromptu press conference. The reporter's voiceover was particularly damning. In a shocking turn of events, 75-year-old Margaret Thompson publicly accused her 3 adult children of abandoning her in a state nursing facility while inheriting $30 million from a distant cousin. The news segment included interviews with other Sunset Manor residents and their families. Dorothy appeared on camera, speaking with quiet dignity about the epidemic of elder abandonment. "Margaret isn't the only one," she said. "There are dozens of us here whose families just dropped us off and disappeared. At least now one of us has a chance for justice." My phone rang again. This time it was a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Amanda Rodriguez from Channel 7 News. I wondered if you'd be willing to do a longer interview about elder abuse and abandonment. Your story has really resonated with our viewers." "I'll consider it," I said, "but not today. I have some other priorities to attend to." Those priorities began with a call to Mr. Wellington, who arrived at my suite within an hour carrying a briefcase full of documents and a tablet computer. "The immediate funds have been released," he informed me. "You now have access to $2 million for immediate expenses while the rest of the estate goes through probate. I've also prepared some options for your consideration. He showed me listings for apartments, condominiums, and houses in various parts of the city. Some were modest, others were palatial. All were far beyond anything I could have imagined affording just 2 days ago. There's something else I'd like to discuss, I said. What would it cost to improve conditions at Sunset Manor, not just cosmetically, but to actually provide quality care for the residents there? Mr. Wellington looked surprised. You want to invest in the facility that mistreated you? I want to make sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to others. Dorothy, Eleanor, and all the other residents there deserve better than they're getting. He pulled out his tablet and began making notes. A comprehensive renovation and staffing improvement for a facility that size would probably cost between $5 and $10 million, but there might be better ways to achieve your goal, such as you could purchase the facility outright and run it the way you think it should be run, or you could build a new facility from the ground up with proper standards. Or you could establish a foundation that monitors elder care facilities and advocates for residents' rights. The possibilities were both exciting and overwhelming. For the first time in months, I felt like I had not just hope, but actual power to change things. Let's start with Sunset Manor, I decided. I want to buy it, renovate it completely, and turn it into the kind of place where elderly people are treated with dignity and respect. Mr. Wellington made more notes. I'll have my team look into the ownership structure and financial situation of the facility. In the meantime, would you like to visit some potential homes for yourself? We spent the afternoon looking at properties. The first was a luxury condominium in a high-rise building with a doorman and concierge services. It was beautiful, but felt cold and impersonal. The second was a house in an upscale neighborhood with manicured lawns and expensive cars in every driveway. It was impressive, but lonely. The third property was different. It was a modest but comfortable house in a neighborhood with tree-lined streets and front porches where people actually sat and talked to their neighbors. The house had 3 bedrooms, a cozy living room with a fireplace and a kitchen with windows overlooking a small garden. This one, I said without hesitation. Are you sure? Mr. Wellington asked. It's quite modest compared to what you could afford. I don't need a mansion, I need a home. This feels like a home. As we were completing the paperwork, my phone rang again. This time it was Michael, and for some reason I answered. Ma, thank God you picked up. Listen, we need to talk. This whole thing has gotten completely out of control. Has it? The reporters are camped outside our houses. Susan's law firm is asking questions about her judgment. Robert's clients are concerned about his family values. This is destroying our reputations. I see. And how do you think my reputation has fared over the past 6 months? What do you think people assumed about a woman whose own children never visited her? That's different. Nobody knew about that except the staff at the nursing home. So it's fine to abandon your mother as long as nobody finds out about it. Ma, that's not what I meant. Look, we made mistakes, big mistakes, but we're family. We should be able to work this out privately, not in the newspapers. We had 6 months to work it out privately, Michael. You chose not to. We were giving you time to adjust. You were hoping I would die quietly and stop being your problem. The bluntness of my statement clearly shocked him. Ma, how can you say that? Because it's true. You all made it very clear that I was a burden. You removed me from your lives as efficiently as possible. The only reason you're calling now is because I have money. That's not true. We love you. Then prove it. How? Figure it out, Michael. But I'll give you a hint. It has nothing to do with my inheritance. I hung up and turned off my phone. Over the next few days, as I settled into my new house, the story continued to dominate local news and social media. Abandoned elders became a trending hashtag as other families shared similar stories. Adult children who had warehoused their elderly parents were being called out publicly, and several other residents of various nursing facilities came forward with their own tales of abandonment. Dorothy called me from Sunset Manor. Margaret, dear, you've started something wonderful. 3 families have come to visit relatives they hadn't seen in years. They're terrified of being the next ones in the news. How are you and Eleanor doing? We're fine, but we miss you terribly. The staff is actually being nicer to everyone, though. I think they're afraid of bad publicity. Well, that's going to change soon anyway. I'm buying the place. What? I'm purchasing Sunset Manor. We're going to renovate it completely and make it the kind of place where people are treated with dignity and respect. Dorothy was crying on the other end of the phone. Margaret, you wonderful woman, you're going to save us all. The purchase of Sunset Manor took 3 weeks to complete. The current owners, a corporation that ran several low-cost elder care facilities, were eager to sell once the negative publicity began affecting their other properties. I bought it for significantly less than its assessed value. My first act as the new owner was to fire Nurse Morrison. I called her into the administrator's office on my first day and watched her face go through a range of emotions as she realized who I was. Mrs. Thompson, but you're supposed to be a resident here. I was a resident here. Now I own the place, and you're fired. You can't fire me. I have tenure, union protection. Actually, I can fire you, and I am firing you. Your severance package is being prepared by my legal team. Security will escort you out. Dr. Brennan was also let go, along with 3 other staff members who had shown consistent disregard for the residents' welfare. I replaced them with carefully vetted professionals who understood that their job was to care for people, not warehouse them. Kevin Phillips was promoted to head of nursing services. His kindness during my stay had not gone unnoticed, and I knew he would set the right tone for the new staff. Lisa Chang, the activities coordinator, was given a substantial budget increase and a mandate to create meaningful programming for the residents. Within a month, she had established art classes, book clubs, gardening groups, and even a small theater program. The physical renovations began immediately. I hired the best contractors money could buy to tear out the old stained carpeting and replace it with beautiful hardwood floors. The walls were repainted in warm, welcoming colors. The furniture was replaced with comfortable, high-quality pieces. Each resident's room was redecorated to feel more like a hotel suite than a hospital room. But the most important changes were to the philosophy of care. No longer would residents be treated as problems to be managed. They would be treated as valuable human beings with opinions, preferences, and rights. Family members who wanted to dump their elderly relatives and disappear would be turned away. We only accepted residents whose families remained actively involved in their care. Eleanor cried when she saw her newly renovated room. It's beautiful, Margaret. It actually feels like home. That was the idea, I said, hugging her tightly. 3 months after my inheritance became public, I received an unexpected visitor. Michael stood at my front door, looking haggard and tired, holding a small wrapped present. Ma, could we talk? I considered slamming the door in his face, but something in his expression made me pause. He looked genuinely miserable, not just frustrated that his scheme hadn't worked. What do you want, Michael? I want to apologize. Really apologize, not just try to get back in your good graces because of the money. Come in, I said reluctantly. We sat in my comfortable living room, and for several minutes, neither of us spoke. Finally, Michael cleared his throat. I brought you this, he said, handing me the small package. It's not much, but I wanted you to have it. Inside was a photo album filled with pictures from when my children were young. There were photos of birthday parties, Christmas mornings, family vacations, school plays, all the moments when we had actually been a loving family. I found this in my attic, Michael said quietly. I've been looking at it a lot lately, trying to figure out when everything went wrong. When did you think everything went wrong? I think it started when Dad died. We were all so young and you were trying so hard to hold everything together. We became focused on our own lives, our own problems. We started seeing you as the person who needed things from us, instead of the person who had given us everything. I turned the pages slowly, remembering happier times. You were such sweet children. You used to fight over who got to sit next to me at dinner. I remember that. I remember a lot of things I'd forgotten about. He paused, struggling with his words. "Ma, what we did to you was unforgivable. I know that. I'm not here to ask for forgiveness or to try to get back into your will or anything like that. I'm here because I needed you to know that I understand how badly we hurt you. Do you understand?" "I think so. We took the person who loved us most in the world, who sacrificed everything for us, and we threw her away like garbage when she became inconvenient. We convinced ourselves we were doing the right thing, but we were really just being selfish and cruel." I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or calculation, but all I saw was genuine remorse and self-loathing. "What about Robert and Susan?" Michael's expression darkened. "Robert is still angry. He thinks you've humiliated the family and that you're being vindictive. Susan is worried about her reputation and her law practice. They're both talking about contesting the will or suing you for defamation. Are you supporting them in that?" "No. I told them they're idiots if they think they can win a legal battle against someone with unlimited resources and the moral high ground." He looked at me directly. "Ma, you have every right to hate us. You have every right to cut us out of your life completely. We earned that. But I was hoping maybe someday, if I could prove that I've learned from this, you might give me a chance to be your son again. Not for money, not for inheritance, just because I miss my mother and I love her." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. This was what I had wanted to hear for months. Not apologies motivated by greed, but genuine remorse and understanding. "Michael," I said slowly, "what you did to me broke my heart. All three of you broke my heart. But you're the first one to acknowledge that what you did was wrong without trying to justify it or make excuses. Because it was wrong, there's no excuse for it. If you really want to be my son again, you're going to have to earn it. It's going to take time and effort and proof that you've actually changed. I understand. What can I do? Start by coming to visit me. Not because you want something, not because you feel guilty, but because you want to spend time with your mother. Come for dinner on Sundays. Call me during the week just to chat. Show up when I'm sick. Remember my birthday. I can do that. And there's something else. I want you to come with me to Sunset Manor and meet Dorothy and Eleanor and the other residents there. I want you to understand what it's like to be forgotten by your family." Michael nodded. "I'd like that. I think I need to understand." Over the following months, Michael kept his word. He came for dinner every Sunday, called me twice a week, and even brought his own children, my grandchildren whom I hadn't seen in over a year, to visit regularly. He accompanied me to Sunset Manor and spent time talking with the residents, hearing their stories of abandonment and neglect. "I can't believe we put you in a place like this," he said after our first visit. "Even after all the improvements you've made, I can see what it was like before. Ma, I'm so sorry." Robert and Susan, meanwhile, did exactly what Michael had predicted. They hired lawyers and attempted to have me declared mentally incompetent again, claiming that my public statements and spending patterns proved I was not capable of managing my inheritance responsibly. The lawsuit was a disaster for them. Mr. Wellington had assembled a legal team that demolished their arguments systematically. Multiple psychiatric evaluations confirmed my mental competence. Character witnesses, including Dorothy, Eleanor, and several other residents, testified about my sound judgment and generous nature. The contrast between my charitable works and my children's obvious greed was stark and unflattering. The case was thrown out of court, and the judge took the unusual step of publicly criticizing Robert and Susan for their unconscionable attempt to exploit their mother for financial gain. The local media coverage was brutal, and both of them faced professional consequences. Robert lost several major clients, and Susan's law firm quietly suggested she might want to consider a career change. But the most satisfying moment came during a television interview I gave 6 months after the inheritance became public. The reporter asked me about my relationship with my children. "One of my children has acknowledged his mistakes and is working to rebuild our relationship," I said. The other two have chosen to view me as an obstacle to their inheritance rather than as their mother. They've shown me exactly who they are, and I believe them. Do you think you'll ever reconcile with Robert and Susan? That's entirely up to them. I'm not interested in superficial apologies or temporary changes motivated by financial considerations. If they want a relationship with me, they need to prove that they value me as a person, not as a source of money. And if they don't, then they've made their choice, and they'll have to live with the consequences. A year after my inheritance, Sunset Manor had been transformed into a model facility. We had a waiting list of families who wanted to place their loved ones there, but we maintained strict standards about family involvement. The facility was featured in several magazines and became a case study for other institutions trying to improve their care standards. Dorothy and Eleanor had become my closest friends and advisors. Dorothy helped me establish a foundation focused on elder advocacy, and Eleanor assisted with the theatre program that had become one of Sunset Manor's most popular activities. Preston Thompson's generosity had given me much more than money. It had given me the power to fight back, to demand dignity, and to create change. But most importantly, it had shown me who my real family was. Not the children who had abandoned me when I needed them most, but the friends who had stood by me when I had nothing to offer but my friendship in return. On my 76th birthday, I held a party in the renovated common room at Sunset Manor. Michael came with his family, bringing flowers and a homemade card from his children. Dorothy and Eleanor were there, along with dozens of other residents who had become like family to me. Kevin Phillips and Lisa Chang joined us, as did Father Martinez and many of the new staff members. As I looked around the room at all these people who genuinely cared about me, I realized that Preston Thompson had given me something even more valuable than $30 million. He had given me the chance to discover what real love and loyalty looked like, and to build a life surrounded by people who valued me for who I was, not what I had. Robert and Susan never came to the party. They had made their choice, and I had made mine. Some wounds can heal with time and genuine effort, but others serve as permanent reminders of the importance of treating people with dignity and respect when they're vulnerable and dependent on your love. I thought about Preston often, wishing I could thank him for remembering a small kindness from 60 years ago and turning it into a chance for justice and redemption. He had seen an 8-year-old girl share her lunch with a lonely boy, and somehow he had known that same girl would grow up to be a woman who deserved better than abandonment and neglect. The money was wonderful, but the real inheritance was the lesson that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to demand better treatment, and to build a family based on love and loyalty rather than obligation and blood relation. At 75 years old, I had learned that the most valuable relationships are the ones where people choose to love you, not where they're supposed to love you. As I blew out the candles on my birthday cake, surrounded by my chosen family, I made a wish that every elderly person could experience the dignity, respect, and genuine affection that had become my daily reality. Preston Thompson's $30 million had bought me freedom, but the relationships I had built with that freedom were priceless. The story of my inheritance had become a cautionary tale about elder abuse and abandonment, but it had also become a story of hope and redemption. Sometimes justice comes when you least expect it, from the most unlikely sources, and in ways you never could have imagined. Sometimes the family you build is stronger than the family you're born into. And sometimes, even at 75 years old, you get a second chance to live the life you deserve.